Happy Saturday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Erudition Network. I am the founder, Eddie K. Phillips. Today, you're only going to see me for a little bit. We are going to do a youth forum that will be ran by my sons, allowing young people to come on and talk about some things that are affecting them right now, today, in the world where we live. If you are joining us, today, I ask you to please be very interactive in your comments. Um, Allow young people who you know, whether they be your own children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, whatever, uh, to be able to come on and speak to where we are right now. My sons will spend the next 2 hours talking to with themselves and also with others to try to pull out the where we are and get the idea, get some information from our youth that we don't often talk to them about. And so, I wanted to get on briefly just to introduce them. Both my sons uh, are my older sons. One in college, one soon to be graduating, going to college, so they understand the people within their peer group. You may also see some of my younger children later on during the program who will come on and give their thoughts and things on it also. I want this to be very, very interactive. I want people to be involved. So often we do not get a chance to hear from our youth. Uh, and I was raised both in church and in my family to be for young people to be allowed to express themselves. We've tried very hard to reach out to a lot of people to try to get them to come on, and it's a very hard thing when it's young people because when you're not, people don't often give you the chance to speak. A lot of them don't really know how, if it's true that they can speak. So I'm encouraging you to get your young people on and to speak to this thing, speak to what we're talking about today. All right. Without any further belaboring and talking on my part, I am going to bring both my sons in, and they will be able to um, run the rest of this program, and that will be the last time you will see me today. Boys, it is in your hands.
All right, thank you.
You ready then?
So, Papa, what I would like to discuss today is upbringing. Me and you had a very good upbringing, to say the least. So, it's a lot of memories. We were raised in a very nurturing household that allowed us to grow in a sense. I remember I remember toy, the toys that we had. Do you remember the video games that we played?
Man, do I ever. We had, I mean, technically, we didn't have very many video games until we grew up a bit. But as a child, we had V Smile. All we had was educational games. We had some V Smiles, some, some Leapfrog toys. It was all learning. And we didn't really have a problem with it. Mostly because technology back then it was a bit too complicated for me and you because it was like, what is this supposed to do? What? How am I supposed to access this?
Yeah, that's what I was also coming to. We had a bunch of educational games, and I think it instilled that desire to learn in us. But I don't think that many people within our younger brothers' age group, or even ours, really maintained that desire to just to basically learn. They never really found it fun or en- encouraging or challenging. Because me and you, we would play those games and it would be challenging. But now we seem to do that as a form of escaping, which I never really truly understood. Remember the very first time we had what was it, the Wii?
Yeah, now that was something.
our very first 2 games were Mario Kart and Wii Sports, but it was first Mario Kart. We didn't know the goal of we didn't know it was a race. We would ride all the way till in 12th place and just keep going. And I was reminiscing on the innocence of that.
Well,
When
technically,
you
as soon as
realize,
we hold on, as soon as we learned about what we were supposed to do, we were not even competitive about it. We were like, well, oh, we're supposed to get in first place. We weren't really thinking about that. And then as soon as we learned we need to go ahead and win the race, we helped each other because we were like, oh, we get new boards and stuff if we complete Grand Prix. So one of us would get in first place and the other would get in second. And if one of us couldn't get in second, well, as long as somebody was in first or second, we would win.
yeah, and we didn't know that that's not how you're supposed to do the game. It's a co- it's a competition. But as of right now, that's all that video games are right now. It's a goal that's to be met, and if, usually it's a form of competition. But we didn't even know that. We didn't even know the goal of the game for a while, and then once we learned it, we still weren't playing it right. So I was reminiscing on the innocence of that and realizing you take something pure like that, and we had to be like what 8 and 7 years old,
Hmm.
and when you take the innocence of that and they're learning, and then I go back and see this coming up generation, and I'm worried because you can take something that innocent where they are vulnerable to anything. They don't. You wouldn't know competition. You would think, okay, there's a goal to be met. How do I help you get there? We weren't really focused on it's about me. I gotta get to first place. I gotta do this. So when you corrupt something like that, like the mind of a child, and you instill the idea that winning is everything, it's it's a problem.
I mean, lots of shows talk about that. How e- always winning is a big problem. Because if you always win, eventually you're going to break down when you finally lose, or when you come just a bit short of what you used to be able to do. Like, let's say you're always getting 100% on every single test you do. And then one day you still pass with an A, but it's 98%. Now all of a sudden, you don't know who you are anymore. You're stressed out. You're screaming, thinking, man, I could have got this test. I could have won. I could have got 100. And now you see your grade and you see someone else with 100% and they're so happy, but you were never really that happy when you got 100%. You were just getting 100% because you were used to getting 100%.
You see, people knew that. So the games now is that they learn, they reward you, like with the video games as of now. The same thing would happen with the V Smile that we had. It would reward you in ways that, oh, you completed this. Now you get this. Something easier to help you along the level. You're like, okay, this is how the game is played. We take that same energy with everything that we do in our walk through life. Of something is going to, we're doing something to make it easier. However, I got into the point of video games because that's really all our young people know right now. But me and you, we came up differently that early 2000s when we were actually able to see that shift in technology from book and brick and mortar school. We had So I want to ask you, what books did you remember growing up with that do you think helped you encourage you to read?
Man, I
Not
remember.
really in a sense helped you to learn anything, but what gave you that motivation to read?
I mean, we had books when when we were children. We had those Sesame Street books. We had Winnie the Pooh books. We had a lot of books. But if anything, when I went to school, I remember I had a teacher. I forgot which grade I was in. It was either second or first grade. She loved Dr. Seuss. Just absolutely loved any book about Dr. Seuss. And I remember one day it was we were all stuck in the room because it was free time, but it wasn't lunchtime. Everybody had completed their work early, and we were just like, okay, so what are we supposed to do now? Because the bell hadn't rung. So I went to the corner, grabbed one of the books, and I remember what it was. It was red fish, blue fish, one fish, two fish. And I was like, this seems kind of it seems kind of fun. That's what I thought. And I was like, man, this is interesting. So I picked it up. I started reading, flipping through the pages. I was like, man, these are some figurative things, but it's really interesting. And it rhymes, so it was like, man, it grabbed my attention. It was like, man, this is even for figurative words and for things that don't even exist. As a child, you would imagine I was like, oh, this is wonderful. So as soon as I read that, that was it. I was interested in reading. And then as I grow up, I've gone ahead and read, cookbooks and all sorts of other stuff.
Yes, I want people to see what you were talking about because I don't think they understood what you meant. I made a PowerPoint years ago, just added to it, about the childhood that we experienced so that we could try and create that with our own kids because it worked well. It was nurturing, it was fun and engaging. And I think that's where we lose a lot of our young people. They have to engage. Mike says mine mine were choose your own adventure books. I love choose your own adventure books. We didn't really have that as much, but when we learned about that, I remember that Christmas that mom had gave us those choose your own adventure books because we had saw some old ones, and because mom had loved them, as dad said, mom loved choose your own adventure books, and we ran across some old ones that were just sitting in the closet. We're like, these are fun, so we got them, and it was like, wow, that's fun. We were learning words, better words anyway. I think I remember it was War with the Evil Power Master, and it said numerous. And I'm like, what is numerous? And then we had a dictionary, so because back then, if you remember, YouTube and Google were on our Wii U. We didn't really know about YouTube and Google like that until later, much later.
I
So,
mean, at the same time, we did learn about Google and stuff while we were in school, remember? Because they did let us use the computer, but it wasn't really for that. It was mostly, lessons and all sorts of other things, but some children would, play on games and stuff. But even then, they didn't really know about Google.
well, yeah, because they wouldn't really let you. We had tech classes, even in Florida Pitt, but they didn't really go through that. And they were using Internet Explorer, which we later found out which is not a good idea.
Yeah, especially on slow computers. Man, that. was
But
a long wait.
let's look at the pictures that we have here. We have do you remember the Bible adventures? Mom would read us those every night
Yeah.
on a religious basis. It taught us the more, and that's when we realized morals of stories. The moral of a story that we later realize is basically the theme. That's what they tell them now. What is the theme of the book? I just helped Matthew with what was it, Wrinkle in Time. They wanted to know what was the theme of the book. He was reading it with the class, and I wasn't sitting there with them because they wanted to make sure that they could read on their own. However, I think it is important that you should have and allow kids to have their parents or their any sense of family in the room, because I remember it wasn't so much the story itself, but when Mom was reading us these Bible stories, it was like, oh, okay,
Well, hold on, hold on.
that's a
I do have
familiar
something to say
voice.
about that though, because yeah, I agree. Having someone in the room with you is helpful for two reasons. One, because it gives you emotional support. You're like, oh, somebody's here, and also because you can't trick your family. They already know what you know, so now you have to act like you know it, and you know it. And trust me, if you don't, there will be consequences.
You know, yeah, that is true, because they did know that we knew what we knew, and if we didn't act like it, it was a very long reading session. Which brings us to learning with these. You remember those?
Yeah, man, we had a lot of learning games and books. Oof, man.
The summer link books. This is when I realized that there probably is no sense of learning without tears. But you need that friction, because you need that friction. What do I mean by friction? You need you like swords. You love the Japanese culture, the Asian culture in general. When you are sharpening a sword, you need that rock, you need that friction in order to sharpen that blade. That's what Summerlink books was. We It was painful. We didn't really want to do them, and but this was our sense of fun, if you can believe that.
I mean, anything's fun when you know it, because you get shown that with math. Once you know it, it's like, oh, this is easy, this is fun. But when you don't, it's like, oh, this
Yeah,
is
that
not fun.
we later came to find out when we moved into higher grades, like in middle school, they started including the alphabet into math. It's like, oh Jesus, I didn't learn this. But
But the question of, do you think reading is hurting the black family? The lack of reading is hurting the black family. I would say, yeah. Because think about it. It's very important for, because think about it. Say, what words that we used to know when we were children? We weren't saying all this indeed. We weren't saying really much. We were saying buts and all sorts of other words. But as we got older, we were like, oh, all we have a whole vocabulary that we use that we never used to use. And it's like, man, I completely forgot how the words I used to use as a child before I learned all the other words. Because saying however did not really come to me as a child. It was more, well, but, and it was like,
yes, VTech was the moment of our childhood. Fisher Price in general. That was that was childhood. Yes, we that's what I had what I was getting to. I didn't like math, but I didn't like reading. But once you learn it, it stays with you. It would In these Summerlink books, it was teaching you math, and it wasn't just teaching you that adding and subtracting. Sure, it would have 3-digit numbers where you're adding, subtracting, division, multiply, but it would also do consumer, where you're teaching money. It's teaching you how to save money. So we had a piggy bank, our Toy Story alien piggy bank, and we would
Ah,
save
right.
coins in there. It taught us the value of spending money and saving it. As of right now, people do a lot of within our age group. They didn't really put a value on money, and they decide, okay, well, I'm gonna go spend it on the next biggest thing. They don't know how to save, and they don't really care to, and is disheartening.
That's because of the problem of living the now, because you don't know. Because the problem with it is people believe, since they equate it up to, oh, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You never know what's going to happen, so it's best just to use it now. And then come soon as the future approaches, you realize, oh no, I shouldn't have
But you
used it
know
for
what?
this.
We were taught learn long-term goals like that. Yeah, our parents taught us it, but we in the shows that we were watching, they would teach you long-term goals. The video games we play, just the things that we did in general that helped us to read, helped us to learn. And that says what are young folks doing if they're not reading? Well, what they're doing is they're doing gaming. It's not VTech learning. It's not any learning of colors or anything that you can do of math, reading, whatever you want to say. What it is, or even basic, what it is problem solving. There are good ways of learning like that. You have PlayStation, Wii's. They teach you problem solving in a sense of how do you overcome this obstacle. It's very linear. Basically, Mario has to run across the stage and get to the flag, get to the obstacle. That's great. The way that you try and get to there, that's the form of problem solving that you're trying to figure out.
Yeah,
However, when you,
along with collecting collectibles, because that's what me and you and Matthew and Elliot do. Because
yeah, it's a rewarding system. And we recently, for me, a t- we did a psychological study where we had to reimagine Walter's marshmallow test, and basically what would have changed if factors had been different. Well, if people were sitting there with peer pressure, which is what a lot of our young people are susceptible to now, when you see learning games such as VTech, Power Touch Learning System, Leapster LMAX, and these are still here. VTech is still around, Leapster, but if we played these up well into the time we were 12. And when we had all of that. But when you get here, could you imagine how peer pressure would play into that? Oh, you're doing learning games. I remember when we had went into school and I said, "Well, what video games do you play? What device do you have?" And I said, um, LMAX V Smile. They didn't know what I was talking about. What they did see was this. The DSi was everywhere. People were sneaking it onto school and you would get in trouble. And that peer pressure would say, well, now I'm an outlier. I don't know what Mario is. I don't know what that game is. I'm trying to educate myself. My parents say that that's good, but I don't put an emphasis on that. So then I conform. And that's really our biggest issue. We don't we don't hold any self-esteem really. What we do is conform to the thoughts of others, and social media has gotten very bad at that. I remember the Nabi and the Samsung Galaxy for kids. When Matthew and Ellie were playing that, they were saying, "Well, we don't know what that is." They would watch YouTube and they said, "Well, there's a Wii." That's the only I remember that's how we ended up getting the Wii U because they had saw it. We didn't know there was another Wii system, and we had that thing for over 5 years. Finally, finally burnt out. But we need to think about that. How our young people are conforming to basically our own, and we're not uplifting our people either. So instead, what they do is they refuse to learn. It's it's rather discouraging, but there is ways that we can counter that. The way that we can teach that self-esteem again is you remember the TV shows that we had. It wasn't just our parents. It was shows such as everything on PBS basically. You had Cyber Chase. It made math fun. You had Dragon Tales where you had fictional characters. You had Rescue Heroes which emphasized police officers and other heroes, police officers, firefighters, road workers, sanitation workers.
Yeah, but the most helpful was Blues Clues because man, Blues Clues was really good for us back then. Because I remember when we were young, we would watch Blues Clues come almost all the time. Every single day was Blues Clues because we didn't really have any. We didn't have anything else. We had DVDs up the wazoo. We had enough DVDs to keep ourselves entertained and learning. So it Sesame Street, Winnie the Pooh, ooh, Blues Clues, Bob the Builder, Barney, all that became what we our entertainment. We watched it almost all the time, especially since you for some reason decided every single we had to watch something over 1,000,000 times because you were really into it. I was like, okay. And then
Yes,
as soon as I was about to, but at the same time, that's what we did. Me and you would take turns watching a movie over and over because it was like, man, this is so fun. This is this is amazing. And it was like, man. But eventually, yeah, it was like, man, are we gonna watch this? Are we gonna watch this again? But then again, as soon as Elliot and Matthew were born, we watched those things for their sake as well because we were like, yeah, you need to learn this. You need to learn your numbers. You need to learn problem solving. You need to learn how to get along. It was it was more of an experience for because and even when we revisited those movies, we had more to learn from them because we were like, oh, before I didn't know what they were talking about, but now I understand what they mean by getting along and not looking at somebody in a wheelchair and being like, well, you're you can't move, so you're not equal to me. And everybody would be like, no, that's not just because he's like this doesn't mean he's not human. And it's like, if we have this mentality for all these movies, if we have an episode for this, how come we can't? How come there's so many of our generation just that just goes well? I don't know how I could get along with this person. They're not of
That goes back
social equal
into
standing.
what we learned, because I was trying to figure out that link between why are our young people conforming. We were taught these. These are shows that started in the early 2000s, and Naughty was remade, and so was Bob the Builder. I prefer the original, but that's my own personal bias. But it's still out here, and Cyber Chase is still going. Arthur is about to end just recently. And Mike brings up Reading Rainbow. PBS in general, PBS Kids, PBS, all of that was wonderful. And I agree, we do need more of that. This formed core memories that you could still pull up in your memory and be like, there was a show about this. The Wiggles, the Blues Clues. It every time Blues Clues taught you how to problem solve, figuring out between where Blue had left the clue. And it was fun getting there. You want to engage with people. If you do not engage, then you do not have their attention. I don't know if they've taken Caillou off yet. I believe they did out of controversial issues. But I don't know. Between the Lions, yes, we watched Between the Lions. That was good. Seeing the mouse. And at the time, you don't really know that's puppets. You don't really care. It's just something that you're watching, and it's fun. And again, is grabbing your attention. But if you only allow the internet to grab your attention, and we know that the internet's not all that pure. We do need that again, because why am I saying this? Our young people are dying. I just recently saw a 13-year-old boy. Cop jumped out of the car. It was a chase of some sort, and just within seconds, that boy was gone. Center mass gone. 13 years old. Chicago. And it brings us to the next point. Do you know who these people are, Papa?
I know some of the faces.
Let's try this one. This first one. It happened here. Anderson Cooper had brought up a point of history remembers the names of the murderers more than they do the victims. I want to see if that was true. So recently, like as of 2 years ago, we did a psychological study, and that's why I want to find out. And this is the same test. So, do you know these people in this picture? What was that about?
Seeing as how I'm gonna make an educated guess here because can't really see too well, but those look. Honestly, I have no idea. Sorry, Teddy.
This right here would happen in Colorado when the Dark Knight movie came out. This was James Holmes' victims. Now, when you hear James Holmes, you instantly go, "Oh, I know what that is." John Lemire, Navy dude, someone that our dad had known, died protecting his girlfriend, threw himself in front of the gun. We know James Holmes, but we don't do a good job remembering these names. That's why when you hear people say, remember the name Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, the reason behind that is because of things like this. But I don't think we understood that. Young people, they have a tendency of also jumping onto the bandwagon where they just go, it doesn't pertain to me, but I can't go out here and scream their name. But they don't know why. This is the reason why. Because we don't want to remember the cop's name. We would rather remember George Floyd because he was a victim. That was a man's life that was taken. We don't want to remember George Zimmerman. We would want to remember Trayvon Martin because it creates a trauma, and we don't need any more traumas. On here, this over here, those were the people who were victims to Dylan Roof's shooting when he walked up in that church and just massacred everyone. These are the people that died. It did not go over the people that were wounded. And those who are still scarred for life, knowing that their loved one is missing or they can't go in there and go home. So we really do need to emphasize and go back as to why we are shouting names in the first place. Because too often are people like me and you, or in our age group, and a little bit older, they go, well, I'm going to just go and come back. They don't use any critical thinking at all. What they do is that they go and focus on, well, I'm just going to combat authority with no sense of critical thinking at all, which means, what is critical thinking? A process of saying, I want to get something done and I'm going to put forth the action to do it. That's what sparks movement. When you don't, you're just shouting people's name and you don't do them proper justice. And then what you do is that you look rowdy in the eyes of others and they go and say, oh, that's nice. It's like a fan. You can hear the buzzing of the fan, but after a while you're desensitized to it. You don't really care. And then after a while you forget why it's cold. So that's what I want to point out. We don't want to just sit there and be like, I'm cold. You need to figure out and go back and figure out, why am I cold? Oh, there's the buzzing of the fan. This is why we're doing this. Because when you forget the reason behind a movement, you're not moving. What you're doing is just screaming. Another
That's a
thing
fair
that
point.
I want to point out is that recently there has been a lot of suicides between our young people. Some people that I've known and they struggle with, and I know that that's going around. And I can only pray that they're okay, because I don't really talk to them anymore, and that's not of my own doing. That's just the way that things went. And I don't know if you have the same thing, but it reminded me of something, and I was trying to go back and figure out, because that's what you need to do. We need more self-examining. You need to examine yourself to figure out where did this come from. That's why the Erudition Network exists. We're trying to go back and figure out, how did we get here? So I went and examined myself and figured out, how do we get empathy? Where was do you remember, Papa, what was your very first thought of empathy? Meaning that you could properly experience someone else and made you act in a way that you cared about the person.
Well, there was a time it because as I said, as you said, we went to a brick and mortar school, and when you have a bunch of friends, you think, man, I I'm friends with this person because you're a very kind person. And I remember when one of my friends were being bullied, and I was like, at that point, I was supposed to be like, no, no, not gonna do anything about that. But as soon as I saw them running up to me, and they were like, somebody took my shoe, and I was like, well, and it's they were going to get a teacher. I said, okay, you go get a teacher, and I ran over to the playground, chased those dudes around, knowing that I could not breathe because I was like, oh, I forgot I had asthma, but I did get that shoe. I got that shoe, brung it back, and I was proud, and I was proud about it. And as soon as I brung it back, I was like, man, this is it was because the children were bigger. They were bigger than us. So I was like, man, I almost ran out of breath there. As soon as I gave the shoe back, I instantly thought, man, so what happened to make them take your shoe? And then a couple days later, the kid lost the shoe again. There was a there was a wide look search for the shoe because and we were even offered a pizza party to find the shoe. I didn't really want to find the shoe because, well, I would be lying if I said I didn't want to find it because it's pizza. But I also wanted to find it because it belonged to my friend. I was like, hey, and I thought that somebody must have taken the shoe, and that's why that's why they were looking for it. But when I saw the face that they were making, because they were scared, because that shoe belonged, because what would their mother and father think if they lost that shoe and they went home and they didn't have the shoe anymore? So because since I had saw them during on the playground during recess, I was like, okay, so this is what so I went to the playground, I told the teacher, this is what I have. This is where I saw it last. And we went there, we couldn't find the shoe, but I was very scared for that child because I was like, if they I wouldn't want them to get in trouble because they lost their shoe. So as soon as I told that kid, as soon as school's out, since we have to go through the playground to get to where dad picks us up, to where dad and mom pick us up. I said, we'll look for it as soon as we get out. So what we do, as soon as school was let out, we looked for the shoe. I I'm sad to say that we still didn't find it. It took it took one more day before the teachers finally found the shoe. The kid never
But
told me where the shoe was, but
but you took the
it was
initiative
that.
to do that. And so basically what you said is that your first memory was school. So I'm going to go here and ask, do you remember this person?
Hmm. Yeah, I would imagine a lot of people will remember him.
Yeah, you would think, right? People my age and older don't remember Fred Rogers. And I'm like, what? I saw I remember seeing Fred Rogers just he looked like this because it was reruns of the show. I never knew that he left, let alone that he had passed. And I remember Charlie. When we had the Geo tracks, I remember seeing the little Charlie and the bell. And I was like, oh, same as the show. But he, at the end of almost every episode, this was his saying. You've made this day special. You've made this day a special day by just your being, just you being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are. Many people are not taught that anymore. And I think that's really where we get that sense of why so many suicides within our community happen. Even though some of them are suspicious suicides of, oh, they just ended up and killed themselves. Sound mind, nothing wrong, supposedly. But either way, mental illness is definitely a problem. And that last bit of I like you just the way you are, that's what people really need to know now. You have girls putting on makeup, you have boys thinking, I have to have chains, I have to have money, I have to. No. You are loved just the way you are. You need to stop with that whole conforming to either your peer pressure, people that's in your house, or something. And he did this because, and if you remember, my memory of it is that we were in the daycare. Well, me. And that's when mom was working. They would play this on TV. And we were all just sitting there. So even if you didn't have a father figure, and Mike says Mr. Rogers was the only white man my dad felt comfortable with leaving me in the room with, alone with. And even if you didn't have a father, you had a father figure, someone that was there interacting with you. And people neglect that social interaction, whether it's even just through a TV or it's just a computer. Dad was in Bahrain and we still Skyped him. There was still a connection there. Many people don't have that. And when you neglect that for too long, you're susceptible to things. And I believe that if we were to go back or somebody was to create another Mr. Rogers, where somebody is a father figure, is telling you you don't have to do anything else. You are like just the way you are. Then you won't have any problems like that. And that right there, I believe, that is my earliest thing of empathy. Because he would teach you, it doesn't matter who this person is, what you think of that person. If you're angry, you can still like the person. And they're not useless. Killing yourself will not make that better. You've made this day special just by you being here. So please don't go and do something like that. And second of all, whoever instilled that thought in your head, just know that I like you the way you are. That is needed. But we don't have that anymore. And unfortunately, as I had stated, people my age and yours, they do not know. They
The
do not
reason
know nor they care to know about that man or just words like that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. The reason I believe that we don't have a Mr. Rogers anymore is because the the problem in the world is there's too many people. Because look, there's too many people out here with unclean hands. What do I mean by unclean hands? You go around distributing all this hate, all this rage, and by the time you're finally done with all of that and you think, okay, I'm going to make a positive difference, somebody pulls up what you did back then. And though you're trying to make a positive difference, though you're trying to make everything okay again, that one that one thing you did, no matter how minuscule it was, is going to drag your reputation through the mud. So everything you've done to try to further the help that you could have caused, all the good you could have caused in the world, goes away without you ever doing anything. And that's what gets so many people, because by the time you're finally trying to make a difference, you're trying to voice up and you're trying to say, "Hey, this isn't right. How come you're bullying this person because they act a bit different. They look a bit different. They can't do things like this." And as soon as you go into that and you're about to make headway, somebody comes up, doesn't matter who, and they say, "I have this about you. And since I have this about you, then I'm going to use this against you. Unless you play fair and actually do what I say you're supposed to do." And then and for the people who don't go with it, you would imagine that they would be praised and they'll have everybody will be happy and push that aside. But in reality, it's not that friendly. It's more grim. They go, "Well, you said this, and though you apologized, though you said I'm sorry, though you donated all this money, all this cash to people, it doesn't make any difference since you did this one minuscule thing. Because of this, the whole community is going to push you away. We're going to act like you never existed and all the good you have done was just harmful." And then the worst part is you would imagine that, well, furthering ourselves from this individual is good, but then that makes headway for another person. Somebody goes into the group and they say, "Well, I can help." And that person is the same person who's under the influence of the person who just said, "I'm not going to help you," and try and drag the other person through the mud. And because they're being influenced, now they don't care. They could say anything, and that person who dragged this good person through the mud is going to fully support this guy. He's going to do everything in his power: money, lawyers, there's movements, t-shirts. And all the while you think this is helping your movement. In actuality, it's not helping anything. It's helping this guy's profit. His profit is now turning into a movement. A movement that has no cause, as you just said, because if you're just screaming a name, what's the point? You're screaming for no reason. You have
Well, let's
no
think
idea
about
what
it.
you're doing.
Then, if that's true, then it would not be called a movement. And that's the thing that you just said there. In our mind, we say he's doing a movement. It's not a movement, it's a
Hold on, hold
protest.
on. There is, I hate to cut you off here, but there is something. It is technically a movement. Because saying it's not a movement means that people are seeing it as complete white noise. But because of that influence, because of that power they gave you, it is a movement. But it's a movement for the wrong people. It's a movement for the people who hate this. They're rallying against this because you keep protesting it. You keep saying, "This is my rally. This is my protest. You're going to come help us." And all the while, that man who drug that good person through the mud and made your entire movement pointless is rubbing his beard and he's going, "Man, this is going better than planned." Drinking, sipping, eating all the money you're getting and going, "Man." And then as soon as you realize, wait, this protest isn't helping us, he goes, "You best keep protesting. Otherwise, I'm going to announce all this stuff I made you say, and I'm going to drag you through the mud because you no longer have my interest in mind." So it's a protest, but it's a
And that
protest for the
that's a good
man.
That's a
better
great
known as, the enemy.
that is a great point. And I wish people understood that more. But people don't say that like that. Of, well, it's a movement, but for the wrong people. They just say, well, it's a movement. Though the way that you just broke that down is how I wish young people would combat that. Because I asked the person, okay, then how do you explain that that's a movement? They either instantly conform, and then that kills the discussion. You can't do anything if they conform. It's not a discussion. What it is a okay. We don't need yes, man. We need a discussion. The one that you just provided just broke down everything that we've been going through. We have it's a movement for the wrong people, and when you don't have the person who's running that movement's interest at heart, you decide I'm gonna get rid of them. And if you do something crazy, I'm gonna drag your name to the mud. That's what's happening over here in government right now, where we saw with Mitch McConnell and everyone else in the Senate and Congress. Even. It's a
I
lot of
mean,
that going on.
it's far beyond that. We're dragging everybody through the mud. We're going, because the problem with it is, if I can get a congressman, if I could get a famous person, I could drag your name through the mud easily because
So
nobody
there's
knows you.
so there's another issue going on around with young people on the same thing that we just discussed just then, conforming and not being able to progress a discussion. There's another thing going around on do video games cause violence?
Man, I just wrote a paper about that last semester. Oh, man.
Because I asked somebody this, Alex and Alistair, friends of mine that were back in Virginia, just asked them in Messenger, because they always talk about this. They love debate. They just don't want their face seen in public. So, do video games cause violence? And give it a express why. Why do you think they do or they don't?
I don't say, like I said, because as I said, I posted a paper about this. They didn't want me to just go with one opinion. They wanted me to look at both sides. And that made me realize we may not, we may not, video games don't necessarily cause violence. Quite the opposite. It helps. There's video games that will help you learn, help you team up, as me and Tay just described. There's games that will pin you against each other in friendly combat. There's stuff like that. But the only problem with that is when you get to more violent games like Mortal Kombat, Grand Theft Auto, and stuff, you think, why? But it's R rated. It's not for that reason. So giving a person a game who isn't that age or can bear or will try to imitate it, that's what the rating is for. That's why they say that this is not for people under 18. This is not for people under this age limit unless watched by a guardian. But the problem arises with that. You may not use it for violence, but now you know just how to use it for violence. Mortal Kombat. You may not kick somebody in the leg in real life to imitate it, but you know that this will cause damage. You may not shoot somebody up. You may not shoot a store up like in Grand Theft Auto, but now you know it'll work. Just because the game isn't, just because you don't believe that it can be used for violence and that it doesn't cause violence, it doesn't mean that somebody with the right mindset can't use this against you. Sure, you can't throw fireballs and use freaking. Sure, you can't throw fireballs. Sure, you can't freaking use a flippy kick like Johnny Cage. You may not be able to buy a whole rocket launcher like in GTA. You're not going to be able to do all this, but You know just how to hurt a person with your normal with the powers in your hands, just by freaking knowing it. Just by knowing it itself allows you the information that, hey, this gun, if I shoot it in the right places, will hurt this person but not kill them. If I punch this dude in the face, he'll bleed, but he won't die from it. If I kick this dude in the back of the head, like this movie, like this game, like this cutscene, like all this stuff I see, it'll possibly kill them or immobilize them. And that's the problem. You may not see it as dangerous. You may not see it as causing any harm, but that's you. You already, because you have it in your mind, I'm not going to ever use this. This is just a stress relief. This is just fun for me. Why would I go outside with a gun into a school, into a home, into a hotel, onto the street? Why would I use this for that kind of cause? But one man's one man's thought is another man's motivation. You're thinking, I'm not going to, but that person's thinking, hey, if I can get whatever I want by using this gun in this game, if I can use these chains and wrap it around this thing's neck in this game, then why can't I do it in real life? And then it becomes a problem, a evil that was spawned from the thought of that one person. And though, yeah, you can go ahead and say, well, doesn't that make video games evil? That's not necessarily true because it's not for you in that case. You're supposed to be watched by
So
someone.
let's look at this, because I agree. But let's think about this. Any form, because as you had just said, one man's thought is another person's motivation, and that's true about anything. Anything can be said like that. When you think about it, so let me make the argument that I made with Allison when she said I had raised the question, do video games cause violence? She said they have the potential to. So I wanted to go further into that. Basically, you said the same thing. They have potential. So let's think about this. The people who designed Modern Warfare, Call of Duty in general, Mortal Kombat, Grand Theft Auto, the people that designed this, do you not think that do you think those people are violent? The people
Well,
that designed it?
yeah, you would have to be a bit violent to think of these ways to hurt each other. So you would have to be a bit violent, but all in all, if it's just for a game, it's not really. I'll say it's not direct violence. It's more indirect
In what way?
in the way that you have to test these theories in order to actually put it in a game. You would need to know how to throw a punch in order to put a punch in Mortal Kombat. You would need to know how to reload a gun in order to put it in Call of Duty. And then freaking
Exactly.
Grand Theft Auto, you gotta be able to know how money works in order to use it. So more indirect.
Exactly. So when you have the people that make Mortal Kombat, I see what you're saying. The people that's doing all those crazy combos, somebody had to go in there and make that skeleton and say, you're going to do this, and this is going to damage the person. Some moves that you inflict in Mortal Kombat would instantly kill the rational person. They get up, bounce back, and then you realize it's a game. But it does have the potential to give a person motivation to be violent. However, what makes you think that the people, because any idea, all these games, I want you to think about it, just started as an idea. There was no such thing as Mortal Kombat. Before somebody said, somebody should have a rope dart and make it Scorpion. Somebody should explain the military lifestyle and make it interactive in a sense of killing or saving people by means of killing. Whatever your preference on that may be. Or Grand Theft Auto, where you can just commit every crime in a bubble in a very safe environment, fictional world. But when you think about it, the people that designed it, they have to have some violence in them too. Are you calling those people violent? They made the game. So what? Would you prefer that somebody didn't create an outlet? Because some of these can be used as an outlet, not just motivation, but used as an outlet to channel that aggression somewhere. But when you sit there and you say, well, video games cause violence, they still haven't found the link to that. And that, I believe, is the reason why. Because it's not really there. Because then you go into that philosophical question of, are humans evil? Are
Well, I
they
mean,
innately evil?
I agree with I agree, but I I also agree with what the comments said. The thing about it is, you can get this type of information to hurt people from any sort of media. You could read a book about, you could read Mary Beth, you could read freaking Macbeth, you could read Romeo and Juliet, you could read classics and learn all this type of violence, and it'll all be the same. All it is some words on a piece of paper.
And I agree. You can get that from anywhere. And that's basically what I'm saying. And it has an origin point of somewhere is also what I'm trying to stress. It derives from somewhere. When you have Ernest Hemingway, he's a very descriptive writer. Would you and news, things that you hear in the news, you have things like this. And they can cause violence. They can spark motivation to avoid violence. They can be an outlet of, man, that's unfortunate, but entertaining to see. But nobody was able to find that link between, do video games cause violence? And that I believe is why, because you realize you don't, there really isn't a link for that.
I mean, as I just said, if violence is even in your book, you have to find something to blame for this. You can't blame a person, because the thing about it is, the problem that I believe we all have as a as a people. I wouldn't say as a race, a country, as just people, is we always try to blame it on somebody who's long gone, somebody who's already deceased. They could care less. All the racist stuff they said in the past, the best thing you can do is tear down the statue. And then the worst part, but the better question, who's stopping you from tearing down that statue? It's not the person from back then. They don't care. They're wherever they're going to be for the rest of eternity. Rather it be in the ground, heaven, heck, doesn't matter. They're gone. The person who's stopping you from tearing down this statue, from calling them out on their racism from back then, is a person, is the human being there now, one of their descent, rather it be one of their descendants, somebody of a like mindset. It's that person who's trying to stop you, not that person from hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. They're gone. But what? But If you keep blaming it on somebody, if you keep saying I'm not my ancestor, instead of actually saying, hey, we've changed. We're not racist anymore. We don't care about skin color. We don't care about social standing. We just care about who you are as a person. Because that's what it comes down to. If you're will like for what you said, Teddy, if you're willing to hurt somebody, you should be judged for that. So, Teddy, I have a question to ask you, because you've been asking very good questions. I took a criminology class last year. So I have, and there was a question that was on my mind because of it. Should there, it asked me, should people be allowed on bail for, and I want you to really think about that. Should people be allowed on bail?
Hmm. It depends on what the crime is.
That's what I said as well. But I'll give you a scenario. If somebody, if there was a, if there was a person who robbed, I'll give you some vague details. Let's say a person robbed a store, held somebody up at gunpoint, and threatened to shoot him. There was a child in that store that they were robbing. They said that if you don't give me the money out of that counter, I'm going to shoot this child. What do you think? Should they be allowed out on bail?
Hmm. No, definitely not.
And why would you say that?
Because they will do it again. That's attempted murder. However,
That's the problem. Oh wait, no. Keep going, keep going. Sorry.
that's you did make some good points. I'm glad that you're on and we were able to discuss that. However, we do have other people in the forum, and Matthew and Elliot are coming on. For those of you that are watching Erudition, that have watched Erudition, you have seen our two brothers, Matthew and Elliot. They are very smart, sometimes for their own good. But without further ado, here they are.
What's up, my brothers?
Hello.
Hi.
All right. So, Elliot, Matthew, what do you guys think about what me and Tay are talking about?
Uh, I, I think that it is not fair that people are getting killed in shops, even innocents. Instead, and people will need to have guns on them. I'm joking. Uh, okay, Elliot, you can go.
Guns? Oh, I I'll say something about that Matthew said. I believe that only people that are trusted should be able or allowed to have guns. Because recently there's been a lot of mass shootings in schools and stuff, and just basically anybody can buy a gun nowadays. And I feel like that's a problem, and it should be fixed.
Yeah, I agree with that, Elliot. But that goes back into what I said earlier. Because I asked Teddy that question about a robber. Teddy said that, yes, he shouldn't be allowed to go out on bail. The only problem is, and I raised the same question with my criminology teacher, you have to think about their motive. Why are they doing this? Why are they holding a gun up to you? Is it because they're thinking of ill will? Is it because they believe that somehow or are they holding you up, or are they using that gun in self-defense, or because they don't have what they need in order to survive? To answer Teddy's, the reason I wouldn't say that person I just described to Teddy didn't know anything about him really. I gave him the vaguest detail. because you can only take my words at face value. But if you watch a recording of that and you see what looks like a person in rags running into a store, skin and bone, holding a gun up to you, saying empty the thing because they need money, you would instantly think, oh, this person this person's poor. They have no money. They have no food. What if he has a family? What if he has rent he has to pay? That's the instant thought that you get. You think, man, what is wrong with this person that they need this food, that they need this money? Is something going wrong with them? It'd be simple to say that they were probably uh, they were probably looking for money for drugs or something. But if you look into that person's lifestyle and you find no such reason to find to question them about drugs, then you no longer think about, oh, they must be they must they must need freaking they must need help. Because if you're looking at it at the standpoint of a judge and somebody gives you the vague detail, there's no evidence for the contrary that shows you that it's a possibility that this person needed help, you wouldn't go with it. You would go like, well, there's no evidence that says that this person was poor, needed help, so I'm going to pronounce him guilty and he can't get out on bail. But let me ask you all another question. If there's a person who walks into court and the crime he's accused for is murder, this man was on his own property. He shot somebody because they were in his kitchen holding a knife, and he was upstairs sleeping when they walked in. What do you guys think about that? Should they be let on bail or should they be accused? Elliot, Matthew?
I say they should be accused. First of all, why did you have a knife in somebody else's house? If you, and we have heard stories. Is if you see somebody holding a knife and they ain't a part of your family or they haven't been living with you for a little while, yeah, obviously they broke in and self-defense. They step on your property with a weapon.
Okay, Elliot?
I agree with Matthew. If someone you have never seen in your entire life breaks in your house and they're just, oh, I have a knife, it's self defense and common knowledge to protect yourself. So I agree with Matthew's decision.
Okay. So y'all both agree that they should not be let out on bail. All right. Teddy, what do you think?
I believe that.
Teddy, you're muted.
You're muted.
Ah, sorry, I forgot. I forgot. I believe they shouldn't be allowed out on bail.
And why's that?
You you break into somebody's house. Are you talking about the person who broke into the house, or
I'm talking about the person in the house with the knife. I'm talking about the person who's being convicted is the person who shot the person with the knife. He's being convicted.
person? Oh, the person that shot the person with the knife. He's go.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, he could go out on bail mainly because it's stand your ground law. You don't break into somebody's house. That's the problem that we're having with the police right now. You don't break into somebody's house without one having a warrant or having a reason of being there. It's called trespassing. You've broken you've broken the law of trespassing, and now basically what happened to you is just the result of what you done. When you go and and put yourself in a situation where you're going to be shot at, that's basically, there is such thing as suicide. However, that wouldn't be, that's what they claim it as, assisted suicide. I had to look up that, and that's what they classify it as. When you step onto somebody's lawn or into somebody's house, rather, they can get away with that off of, well, the assisted suicide, because he went in there, he was threatening, and he did this. And that's when they don't have motive. So, do you feel when you would be treated fairly as a black male, no matter what the age? Um, that goes, I have something for that. And before I answer, I want you three to see that. So let's pull this up. Do you know about here? This was recent. All except this one. These two instances were recent. But let's go with this one. Let's ask Matthew. Do you, Matthew, know who that person is?
No, I do not.
Okay, let's let's examine this. This young boy right here was the person that was just playing it out in the street, minding his business, playing with his friends. And this this man right here shot at the young boy after this statement says he first tried threatening him with a sledgehammer. This man was put on $10,000 bond. $10,000. The attempted murder of this young child was no more than a $10,000 fine. That's how much basically his life was worth. And I want you to keep in mind, he was at the time probably a year older. He was, oh, that is a good point. He actually shot the child through the window, and he wasn't immediately arrested. That's a concealed weapon, because you can't even see the weapon. The child never even saw it coming. So there's several issues there. But the point is, this child was no more than your age, Matthew. Just sitting there off the side out of his house, and then playing. Could you imagine playing with your friends, and then you run up to somebody's house? I mean, car. You're running past the road. There's a parked car, and somebody shoots you out of the window after threatening you with a sledgehammer. And he only gets put on $10,000 bond. So the question was, I remember talking to James about this, a friend of mine in the 50s. He was talking about how he shouldn't have been on bond to begin with. So, Papa, after the point that you just raised, do you believe that he should have been on bond at all?
No.
He should have been on the electric chair. Why would you shoot somebody?
There was no reason for him to shoot that man. Sorry for cutting you off, by the way, Matthew. There was no point in him being shot. He was just minding his own business, playing with his friends, and some random man came by in his car, just sitting in his car, and decided, well, I'm going to shoot this person. He had no reason, and he should have never been put on bond. He should have got life in prison.
Nah, worse. He should have been put in 17 years of jail and then put on the electric chair.
Well, Matthew,
And
I don't think that.
Looking that up, he was his neighbor.
I mean, Matthew, technically, I would agree because there have been people put on the electric chair with lesser crimes than that. But I agree. But I more agree with Elliot's statement. He should have gotten in life imprisonment because if you're his neighbor, then why in the world you see these children every day and somehow you shoot at them through your window, knowing they're your neighbors, and then you mean to tell me that you can get out of jail if you just pay this freaking sum of money? That's all you have to do? That's not okay. It was a child too. Shooting at a adult is one thing. Shooting at a child is another.
I agree.
I do agree with Matthew too, though, because if if somebody decides that, hey, I'm gonna try to kill this person, and they're just gonna be like, it's like the example you made, Pablo. Somebody breaks in your house with a knife, and self-defense is a thing. So if somebody tries to kill you, they should be killed themselves for attempted murder
But
instead of life in prison.
But sadly, Elliot just told me this a few seconds ago. The death sentence isn't a thing anymore.
Well, the death penalty.
Well,
No, capital punishment is still a thing. In fact, I was going to get into that. James had said the same thing. A friend of mine that I was talking about, when I had brought that up to his thing when this had happened, he said there there should have been capital punishment, and everyone in the chat was like, "Did you just say that?" It was a silence, but nobody really. And he explained his mentality on it, like a child is defenseless, which you all have just brought up. This the child had no means of defending himself. He didn't have a gun. He didn't have a hammer. At best, he had a jump rope that he was going running down the street with. And what is a little child going to do against a full-grown man with a
not
gun?
only that, a
And
yeah,
he didn't
sorry.
even see. He wasn't even able to see the gun in the car. He shot it out the window. So there's a lot of things. People were saying, well, the bond was placed too low, and then he should have gotten capital punishment. It was a bunch of reasonings. So what do you all feel like? You said he shouldn't have gotten bond at all, and I agree. He shouldn't have gotten bond at all.
Uh, I'm
But what
really.
about capital punishment that y'all have just went through?
May, you wanna go?
Yeah. I really feel like he should have been shot in the leg. A death punishment is not allowed, but at least that
No,
would
no,
show.
it is.
No, it
It's
is.
just not
It
in
is,
those
Matthew.
areas.
It's called capital punishment. It is. And in fact, we don't use the electric chair as often,
Yeah, we don't
but
use the electric chair.
we use lethal injection.
Yeah, lethal injection.
It's
where
more
they,
humane.
yeah, where they tie somebody up to the
Uh.
chair and inject poison.
Oh yeah, like the sign.
So knowing that, how do you stand? Because that is an option.
I say they should at least is shoot him and heal him up and then put him in jail to show him how that little kid felt when he randomly got shot with as you said, possibly a jump rope that he was using. What, did he think that he was going to strangle him? No, a little kid doesn't have the strength to strangle a grown man without them being able to pick the child up and at least use self-defense. But why would the grown man with senses, because we all know you have to have a little bit of brain power to at least shoot a gun. So why did he shoot a child of all things? You could have shot a bird, a dog. I don't even care. But why a child, not a dog? Shoot a dog and I will find you.
I I wanna ask a question. Was it only the one child that got shot, or did his friends get shot too?
The post story from that man was he was walking over to his car and he didn't want him there. He told him to leave, and I guess that's when he used the sledgehammer. And then uh, some one thing led to another and he shot him. So no, he was the only one over there. The other kids were running after they heard that popping sound, and there is video footage of that, and it it is heartbreaking. But to answer the question that sparked all this, does are you safe as a black man?
No.
You're not safe as a black boy. There, I couldn't share the picture the, in the presentation because that'll get us demonetized.
Yeah, that is true.
But George Stymie was the youngest boy executed within the United States. Not saying that didn't happen anywhere else because there have been uh, gun squad executions elsewhere. But anyway,
And that,
there he was the youngest person executed in the United States with capital punishment, and his name was George Steinman. They he was 14 years old, and they killed that boy off of what they later found was a lie. Could you
And
imagine? Could you imagine it just minding doing just doing you, and then somebody lies on you, and your life is in jeopardy? The whole story of George Stymie just breaks your heart. They didn't have the electric chair was used at that time. It wasn't lethal injection. When they recently brought up that looked into that case, then they start using more humane ways and all this other stuff. But there wasn't that. They sent a bunch of votes through that child's head, and he couldn't fit on the chair. They used his Bible as a booster seat that he kept reading. And of course, there was the Colonel. His family just had to sit there and watch. There's a movie on it as well. We couldn't post any other video. I couldn't post any other video on there or there because that YouTube is funny about that. But that's happened. So we get into this excuse me. We get into this other issue of the thing that happened here. This picture, do you all know what this is? It was all over the news here in Colorado.
hmm.
You're muted.
I know. I know what that is. When they line those children up, they took the children out of the car and lined them up and had them lay on the hard pavement, and they had them at gunpoint. It looked like they were finna execute them. It doesn't look right. There was no reason to do that to the children. They they're just kids. What could they have possibly been doing to be put like that?
Except smoking cigarettes, because I have been seeing in people in school leaving school
Yeah, but that's the
early
thing.
and doing
No,
that.
not to cut you off, man. But that's the thing. If children are smoking cigarettes or cigars or whatever, that's something that the parents should be blamed
But
for.
that wasn't even the issue.
They line the
The
kids up.
Do you remember what the original issue to this case was?
No, not really.
Okay, let's let's open that picture up again. This car that they pulled him out of was apparently stolen, reported stolen. The police found the license plate and pulled them over because they were driving a stolen vehicle, supposedly. But when you figured out that there was a family in there, this is where the issue comes. Instead of grabbing the parents that could have been the only people to do that, you pulled out all the kids and all laid them onto the ground. This is before they put them on their stomachs on the ground. And I want you to remember, this was also when COVID was happening. That's why he's wearing his mask. So you laid them on the ground, knowing that there's a pandemic that is caused by disease, and you put them on the ground. Kids, at that. So what did you just do? This It wasn't that you didn't handle this correctly. No, what you did is that you were enforcing a message of you were going to humble those kids. You're going to teach them why you do not break the law. And you gotta really think about it.
And now
Why
No,
they
because
and now
the
why would
problem
you have
with
done
that
that?
is, oh, sorry, Elliot, go ahead, continue.
and now forever those kids will have
They'll be
trauma.
scarred.
They'll be traumatized for life for what those cops did to them. And didn't it say on the news that those kids were traumatized and they've had problems eating ever since? They've had
Yes.
problems.
It just recently came up that those cops were going to be charged. You never really heard about that again. But yes, the mother had made the fact that you traumatized her kids. And this is that picture of George Steiny that I was talking about. The, 14 years old, and you were put on an electric chair, and you couldn't even fit on the electric chair. And you believe that a child was able to do any of that. They threw the mask over his face. That's him walking into the execution chamber.
Oh, I think I know who that is.
And that right there is his Bible that's in his hand.
Oh yeah, that's the person who was too short to sit in an electric chair, so he took his Bible as a step stool, and
Wait, I just have one question. Actually, I have two questions, but the first one is: did they get sent to jail for at least a few years? Because I know that they're a certain color that people would not just say no, we're not going to put them in jail. And why can't I say that? That is because this YouTube will probably demonetize us.
No, no, he was not. They didn't. The reason being is that they didn't care at the time. They thought they were in the right. Do you know when this case was rectified?
No.
It's a miracle that was rectified at all. It was rectified in 2014, long after this child had been executed.
Okay, I have another question. If somebody just pulls you out of your car and starts are saying you done this and you done that, and they take you to court and they tell you, please, why why were you in this vehicle? Why did you do this? Why is that? Uh, Why were you in this vehicle that was reported stolen? What do you do in that situation?
Well, clearly, their explanation of it was, you grab everyone out of the car and you throw them on the ground.
Look, I don't understand that. They're just kids. What could kids do to harm two grown men who have guns? There was no reason to do the children like that. And it seemed really racist. There was no explanation for what they did, and everything that they said, it didn't make sense.
And that
They're
is true.
just kids.
That is true because as we have seen a lot on the news that police pulls out a whole family. Police is killed this person. Police is do this. Police do that. But you don't see white on white crime or black on black crime. You only see white on black crime. You only see people, the white policemen going and killing the blacks, pulling over blacks, but they don't show the white ones because we do see white people going over the speed limit, no police chase, is white this, white that, but none of that gets aired on the news.
Well, some of it they do have a whole chase, but you as a get home. Dad says, "Boys, you have to get home to me and your mother. We want you to live. You followed the orders given." This He just disappeared. Okay,
I
but
honestly agree with what Dad's saying there, because the problem is it's a non-winning situation. If you get pulled over by the cops, it's either do everything in your power to make the officer believe rather you did nothing wrong or you have nothing in your hand, car, or anything that can hurt them. You have to make them believe that you are a complete non-threat, meaning you do everything they say, no matter how degrading or humiliating. And that's the reality. When those kids were put on, what I was trying to say was, when those kids were put on the ground, it was less of what could they do, more of I'm going to show you. They were trying to test, I believe they were trying to test the parents, because like Dad just said, you're supposed to get home to your parents. We want to see what you do if we bring your children out on this ground, on this cold ground during COVID, and we want to see if you dare decide to mouth up about it. Because then we can say legally that, oh, he was getting angry. He was going to do something. And then there's the and then everybody would see, every reasonable person would say that's not what happened. But the court would say, well, he was angry. He was in his emotions. And when they turned off the cameras on their chest or somebody stopped recording, we don't know what happened after.
yeah, we see that all too often. The only reason that, because that also brings up, we have seen boys as old as babies getting killed with by the firing of cops in fear, because it's always a fearful situation and somebody ended up dead. You had that incident that happened over in Los Angeles. Man walked up in there, was beating people. He was beating people with a bike lock within the store. The cop goes in there with a full long gun and shoots multiple times. So I want you to think about it. You have a long gun. I went in there with a long gun and I'm going to use it. It has been shown that they will do that because it was in a hotel. I couldn't find the video, but I remember when it was on the news on MSNBC, and the man was sitting there in the hotel on his knees. The cop had a long gun, and he was going to be darned if he did not use it. on his knees, hands up, not doing anything. As dude says, he moved
And shot him.
and shot him to death. The reason that I brought there's so many instances of that is heartbreaking, but I only brought up those two because they were recent. The other one that you may have seen on the side was what was it? Let me see if I can pull it back up. This one. This one I brung up because it was recently talked about in the news about Sandy Hook shooting, where this happened in 2012. I remember when it was on the news and when we were hearing about it. It was an elementary school, and many kids had ended up dead, shot multiple times. Some later died in the hospital of their wounds, and it made me think of Matthew and Elliot. As you can see, I don't know if you can see, but those are the ages. I just messed that up. Those are the ages here, 6 and 7. 6 and 7 years old, and they were murdered. So it doesn't matter. Why did I show you that? Because it doesn't matter about your age, and it's worse if you are colored. So that at any age, you can still end up dead.
Dying. Which I
So so the question is, how do we prevent that from happening? But as we are closing out of here on our 2-hour form, how do we solve this?
I believe the only way to make them stop is by the same way they're making us fear. We need to make it so they can't do the things they want to, that they can't show their privilege. They need to be controlled. It's kind of like they need to be on a leash, because they get overly excited when, oh, I have full control of this situation, when that's not the truth, and they're just doing whatever they want. Dad asked, how do we do that? I believe we should do that by enforcing more laws, like, as Matthew said, maybe like something like lethal injection, or something to just kind of like scare them into stopping doing what they're doing.
or
'Cause
placing cameras everywhere.
I feel like it's the only way to make them stop at this point, because they're not scared of getting sued.
They're not scared of getting killed.
I'm pretty sure they're scared of
No,
getting
because
killed.
No, Matthew, you're kind of wrong there. Elliot, you are kind of right there. They're not afraid of being killed a bit, and this is due to the fact because even they could do something incredibly wrong to you, but in actuality, the court may not see it that way. They may see what you did killing you, even though it was in self-defense. They may still see it as a crime, and you will go to jail for it, if not be killed for it.
but here's what I think that they always think. They think that they're above the law, that they won't go to jail because I'm a policeman, and plus I'm white, I have privilege. But that doesn't save you from being shamed, sued, and possibly being put in jail for life. And I don't, and they probably been prepared for that, and they probably have things in a certain jail cell to escape, even kill more, or you never know what they're going to do next. next thing you know, they could break into a house and kill a black family, and that would get aired on the news. But let's just say a white man and decide to tell on the white officer who killed. Then and they well, the white policeman, I'm stuttering too much. The white policeman would go into the snitch's house and kill them, but that wouldn't get aired on news. It's because they don't want a white on white crime being seen in as much.
That last part confused me.
I'm
So
just
our uncle has said, how do you change the police mentality then?
you at least train them for or 70, well, not 70 years, at least 9 years until they can at least hold a taser, because they say I'm gonna pull out my taser and then they're going to pull out a gun.
Matthew, the problem with that is they've gone through this training. You have to go through a school to teach you. The only problem is their bias. Depending on how they decide to treat you is the entire factor.
I
They
think
could be trained to pull out their taser at a moment's notice. That will not stop them from pulling their gun on you because they believe that you are a huge threat. They believe that you're reaching for something. It doesn't really matter. Their bias is going to be the deciding factor between your life and your your early demise.
And a joke that I
You,
made at the
but
beginning.
Matthew does make a good point. More training, maybe not 70 years, but if you
At
think
least
about it,
9 until they can hold
it's
a
about
taser.
21 weeks, 820 hours, I believe, for you to become a police officer.
I
We know this because we watched Rescue Heroes, me and Papa, and they told you that that's back when police were heroes, firefighters were heroes. Everybody was a hero who helped the community. But as of late, you don't see that coming from police, and it is worrying and scary.
I
So, do you think? Uh, do you think that we can change that? Do you
I
think representation in courts, as Dad has said, representation in courts, Congress, and state legislature will change the situation? Because we have those laws of capital punishment, we have those gun laws, but clearly something is not making a big enough difference because people are still dying.
We need to actually separate the whites and the blacks away from each other, because
no, mate. I'm gonna have to cut you off right there. We already tried that with the
oh
schooling
yeah.
system back in the day, and that did not work. And that's
Yeah, that would be
also
called segregation.
that would be counter racism, Matthew.
And
And
here,
So,
I believe to make a change, we should only allow, like, go back. We should. I would like to answer the question: how do we change the police mentality? I feel like we don't have to change their mentality, but we change the way the cops have stuff on them. Like, they should have non-lethal weapons. Like, they should have only.
they should only have a taser.
They should
At-
have
at
tasers
least.
and something else than a baton, because they find ways to abuse that too. They need non-lethal weapons instead of guns. Oh, I believe that
No,
only
they don't even
I
deserve a
believe
car, because
I only believe that the SWAT team should have guns and lethal weapons, because the SWAT seems like a trusted force of people, like police officers. I feel like they should be the only ones allowed to have guns and stuff to prevent the loss of lives, because it's a problem and we need to fix it.
I completely agree, Elliot, because the problem is what the police mentality. I believe that's the key problem. Because look at the military. Look at the military, look at the SWAT team, look at the CIA. These people have been in training for years. Not
Yeah.
only that, but they are willing to lose that you are trained to not be afraid and pull out your gun at a moment notice, but also to de-escalate the situation. You are
Okay,
trained to do
I,
each and every single one of those things.
I'm gonna have to interject there because that's not technically true. The way that police are trained, the way that most anybody who owns arms is trained, is when you pull that weapon, you are taught to not de-escalate. You're not taught to escalate it either, but you're definitely not supposed to de-escalate
I
because
see.
that could put the cop in danger. That's what people have said. That's a,
No, I'm not saying in
that's
the
the Police
as soon as you
Academy
pull out
training.
your gun. I'm saying before you do that, before things get
Yes,
to the point where you have to.
but let's think about that. The it was recent that you heard a cop in the back on her webcam say, "Uh, we're we're going in hot, or we're going in red hot," and that means weapons drawn. It wasn't even supposed to happen like that. But the moment you pull out that weapon, you don't de-escalate, and that's how they've been taught. Even if so, then it goes into when is it the proper time to pull out your weapon? Because if you're not supposed to de-escalate when you pull the weapon, when is the appropriate time to pull it? And that's that was recently brought up. We're still trying to figure out that in our critical thinking class, and I'm in. How do we do that? And I don't, I don't think, I don't know.
I just realized the idea of the cops having non-lethal weapons is a bad idea. So maybe instead of cops having lethal weapons, it's kind of like squads. Only one person in the squad has the guns, and the others have to do stuff without weapons. Like they have enough weapons on them to you know, do stuff, but not murder somebody. So,
I say they should be entrusted with at least a BB
wait,
gun.
why did you say hi? You, like, you right?
Well,
A
Elliot,
BB gun is a good idea. I do agree with Matt.
Be,
That could be a good idea.
it,
Actually, what they do have is rubber bullets, but we don't utilize them.
Oh, I heard recently.
but I was thinking
I
hard.
have the app Crime Daily and stuff. I like to watch it sometimes to know what's going on. There's this thing. It's like a fire extinguisher, but it's really sticky and it's like a hard foam. So once you spray somebody with it, they can't move, and there's only one way to get it off. So maybe instead of being entrusted with guns, they should be entrusted with stuff like that
I,
because it's been proven to be effective and other states have used it before. So instead of being murdered, they should use something like that.
well, in my opinion, I don't think the problem is guns and all that. Because the problem is
Teddy's.
another criminal can have a gun. We've allowed people to have guns. Even if we say we're going to take away guns, there are people who still have multiple guns. So trying to make peaceful ways is that's a
And
step in the right direction, but
but let's think
it's
about
a
that.
problem of not.
It is it is your First Amendment right to bear arms. That is the country's law. You don't have to take it away, but you do need to be responsible. And somewhere along the lines, I don't think we practice responsibility. But from what I've heard from the three of you, the next youth forum that we do is going to have to be about injustice with police in reference to young people, because this one was more of addressing general problems within the young our community, millennials and the upcoming generation that after. So that's what we will do next time is we will definitely sit there and speak on how the injustice of police and even beyond police, capital, anywhere. That's what we will discuss next time. But before we close out, I want to show one last thing for our audience so that they know why it is important to teach young people. Obama had said, "It is you, the young, fearless at heart, the most diverse and educated generation in our history, who the nation is willing to follow." You've seen that on social media with TikTok. You saw that with Vine. You've seen it everywhere. Young people influence other young people, and we live in a very diverse world due to the internet. That is why Erudition exists, so that young people can have a voice, and so that you are able to pull factual knowledge somewhere off of the internet, and that not everything has to be fallacy, sophistry, or whatever have you. But this is what we need. There was another video quote, but I couldn't figure out how to put that into PowerPoint, from Elon Musk. He said this generation is the most spoiled generation. Everything you is at your fingertips, but so little times do we utilize what we have. We do not want to sit there and look up how to do this and memorize it and encode it. What you do is that you say, "Hey Google, how do you," and then the answer is given to you. You need to learn. Education is the key to solving most of your problems. You are the most diverse and educated generation in our history because you can pull up anything. However, it doesn't help if you don't know what to look up. That's why this exists, and that's why I'm happy that we were able to do this youth forum. I hope that we get more in here next time. But for what it is, I think the message came off pretty well. You all made very good points, and I'm glad that we were able to do this. I will leave the final words to you three as we exit out of here.
Pablo, since you didn't get to go that much, how about you go?
Well, all right. Well, it's I'll say it like this to what Teddy just said. Lastly, I agree. The thing about us being the most spoiled generation is true, and the reason why is because we don't utilize what's at our fingertip. But the reason we don't is because if something's that accessible to you, you're not going to use it. It's the equivalent of having if it's an arm's reach, you know that it's right there anytime, and that time never comes. You keep reaching out your hand to grab something else because you think, I need that in arm's reach now. I need that to be close to me and accessible to me at any time. But the problem is, if you have this in arm's reach and you're not going to use it, that what's in arm's reach could possibly help you get to what you're trying to reach for. But
I get
being
it.
spoiled just means, oh, this can do it for me. And you never learn. You never learn, you never adapt. So the problem with that is how you're the future. All other generations have passed. What's left now is you. And if you destroy everything that was built, that's not on anyone. You may think that, well, my ancestors, what about everybody before me? Don't they have a say in this? They did what they were going to do. It's as I said earlier, they're going to be long gone. They've done their part. They've taught you. They've talked to you. They've helped you learn everything you can possibly do. They're done. They did what they're supposed to do. It reminds me of a book. Look, it was called Rip Van Winkle. At the end of the book, it literally said that he had come to the age where where he can practically be obsolete. He could just sit down, do nothing, and be content with that because he's done what he needed to do. And now everything else is up to his children and all the other children of the future. All right, Elliot, back to y'all go. Oh.
with the with the video finna end, I just want to say, I hope we can continue talking about this. I like y'all's comment, and thank you for coming in and talking, and and I didn't say this when I hopped on the. Uh, you should subscribe if you like the content, and like. And I just want to say that y'all are all appreciated, and
They
you are
really are.
wanted.
Indeed,
Mo-
they are.
Most people don't really eh, get appreciated. And earlier in the stream, um, yeah, you do need a father figure to look up to.
Wait, what?
He said that.
He's talking
Oh.
about Mr. Rogers. And yes,
Oh, yeah,
that's basically what it is. Show appreciation for people and let them know that they are like the way they are and they're special just by being there. And with that, that ends our forum. Thank you all for coming, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Don't forget to like the video.
And subscribe.
Please.
Peace out, people.
Goodbye.
Bye.